This is Marriage on the Half Shell, Raw and Exposed. So, we are going to talk tonight about going through the hard times because we've been through some. I know a lot of people might look at us, look at our marriage externally when we're out, with people and think it looks perfect.
Right.
But it's not. It never has been. It never will be. And we have been through some pretty rough stuff. But the reason I wanted to do this tonight, it was something that happened last week or week before. I watched a series on Amazon called Dope Sick. And it has to do with the big pharma and the FDA, and it's a big mess. And I don't intend to go into that too much tonight myself. I have my own opinions about all of that nonsense and everything that's going on, but that's not really what I wanted to talk about tonight.
How did that inspire what you want to talk about?
Well, every episode was very difficult for me because my mom was one of those people. She was addicted to at least one or two drugs of that caliber, OxyContin and Vicodin for sure, and I don't know what else. So to watch the people on that show struggle with this addiction was really hard for me. That was hard. Okay. Yep. But the reason it hit me so hard too was because I wasn't addicted to painkillers, but at some point when our older girls were teenagers, started taking Xanax, and I was actually trying to think back, remember what triggered it. I do remember having a couple of anxiety attacks when your dad died. That was really hard.
Yeah, okay.
I remember asking the doctor, I won't say his name, but I remember asking the doctor for Xanax to travel on a plane because I was afraid I was getting claustrophobic, right? And that just, everything spiraled from there, I think. I kept telling him that, now I'm struggling with anxiety, so he just kept prescribing it, and it became an everyday thing. I was taking it every day. Yeah. And that's really, it's not the way you're supposed to take Xanax. It really is supposed to be as needed.
Okay.
But it took off from there, and I ended up taking it every day for 10 plus years. Well, I took that, and then I took it was antidepressant, but I was taking it to help me sleep. Insomnia is like rampant in my family, and multiple people have it, and it's it's hard. The
right.
insomnia.
So it's something to help you sleep.
Yes, it was to help me sleep, but I was taking that combination.
Okay.
And that wasn't the wise thing to do by any stretch of the imagination. And then when you and I started really struggling with things around the time that my stepdad died, and then my mom's kept getting sicker, I threw alcohol in the mix.
Yep.
And I was so here I'm doing all three. I'm also homeschooling 6 children, driving them places, doing things with them. I shouldn't have been doing any of that. Now that I look back, I don't ever remember not being tired, ever. It was constant. The fatigue was absolutely constant in my life. So, but I think what struck me when we were watching this, because it was the last episode, and so some of the people who had been struggling to get off of Oxy were finally able to break the cycle, and they were meeting in a group or whatever, and the doctor who was leading the group said, "Where's the crossroads? Where's your decision point where you're like, this isn't good for me anymore, and I have to stop." Because you do kind of have to hit rock bottom. You have to be backed into a corner to give that up. It was very hard for me to give that up. Not like it was, I get it. So our prescriptions are every 3 months. We get refills, right? Something like that.
You get 3 months at a time.
Yeah. And it's been like that for a long time. And that's how I did my Xanax, right? I got it every 3 months. Well, when we get down to the last couple of weeks of that 3-month cycle, I would start to panic. What if he won't refill it? What if I can't get it anymore? What if he won't give it to me? What if it doesn't come in time and I have to go a couple of days without it? I would start internally flipping out.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it's like I'm on anxiety meds and it's making me anxious to think that I might not be able to have it anymore.
Right.
Or it might not be available for a block of time or whatever it was. Because I think there were a couple of times when I had to skip pills in there and it wasn't pretty. It was not pretty at all. The anxiety would come flooding back. I have like kind of a, I guess you would call it a generalized anxiety disorder. Or I think that's what I had. I don't think I really struggle with that anymore. Like I have some anxiety here and there, but I think it's normal human anxiety, not to the level that it was.
Okay.
Back then. That's how I feel. That's what I'm thinking. And it struck me because it started me thinking about where that crossroads was for me. It did have something to do with the fact that you and I were having a very hard time right then. We weren't communicating very well. Our sex life wasn't great. That connection that we talked about the last episode
yeah.
It just wasn't there. Or at least that's how I felt.
It wasn't as strong as it should have been.
No, and I think that you struggled a lot with how to handle my roller coaster emotions. You never knew what you were going to come home to.
True.
It wasn't uncommon for me to lose my mind. I won't say the S word. Pretty frequently. Meltdowns were pretty common. I was trying to process everything, and then I'm doing it while I'm on these drugs. But, so one of the crossroads for me was when my mom finally passed away. I was still taking both the Xanax and the sleeping med, which was a very high dose. It's a very high dose of that particular antidepressant. It was that wasn't fun to get off of either. But anyway, I realized I went through my mom's. I was there for what, a week or two, or
it was a week or so.
Maybe a week plus, I think. Because we had to go through all of her stuff and make all the arrangements and do all the other stuff that you do when your parent passes away. You have to go through all that. And I realized that whole week I felt emotionless. My mom is dead, and I never cried. I never cried about that.
Right.
I think I might have cried a little when I got home, kind of like I felt like a release, I guess. But that was it. I just remember feeling like my emotions were just on a flat line that entire week, and I knew something was wrong. There's something not right about that. I felt like I should be experiencing some level of sadness, grief, anger, whatever it was, but I felt nothing. And I talked to my brother. My brother is a physician's assistant, and I remember talking to him about it, and he was like, oh yeah, that's what Xanax does. It doesn't just keep your anxiety under control. It pretty much takes out all of your emotions. And I had been taking it for a number of years.
Sure.
Prior to, so we're talking about, a lot of years of me taking this stuff. And I just came away from that. I continued to take it for a few more years, but I just came away from that thinking, I don't like this. I don't like who I am right now. I feel like I should be feeling some level of grief or something, anything, but just didn't, And so that was one crossroads. And it was at that point that I started to really process everything and kind of close the door on my childhood, I guess, the the rougher parts of my childhood, right?
Okay.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, you got to describe it. Don't look at me like I can acknowledge what you were feeling.
Okay. Well, I've discussed this in prior episodes. This is not easy for me to talk about because I don't like being vulnerable with, I don't like being vulnerable. I don't like talking about this, but
You're with me.
I know. When you go through a childhood like I did, like there was a lot of abuse and yelling and alcoholism and the drugs and everything else, you can't just shut the door and walk away, which is what I thought I did, I guess. I thought when I left home, when I finally ran away from home, I thought that part of my life is over and I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Right.
But that's not how it works. Right. It took a long time, but it took a few years for me to actually process it all. And I think I was hopefully coming to the tail end of the processing part when my mom passed away. Because now they're both gone and I can really close that door. I'm not going to be getting the alcohol-laden phone calls in the middle of the day anymore, and she's yelling at me and calling me names and, being awful and being mean to my kids and, all of that was gone. It's done.
Yeah.
So it was, at that point I could close the door on all of it and let it go, which is what I did. But now I've let that go and, we've moved away from the church that we were a part of for so many years. That was a big part of the problem too. So now I have less things to be anxious about, but I'm still hooked on this thing. I still probably didn't need it, but felt like I did because those drugs rewire your brain. They knock out your own serotonin and replace it. That's right, basically what they do, right? And you're not a happy person if you don't have a healthy level of serotonin going. That's just not how things work. So, you got something to say?
No, I'm trying to figure out, make sure we're accurate about how the drugs work. They dampen your emotions.
Yes.
So you don't get anxious, but you don't feel sadness or happiness or anything like that, especially being on them that long.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's the result of it. Whatever hormone or neurotransmitters,
right.
Whatever. We probably won't get that right, but that's what it does.
Well, I also know that the sleeping med that I was on, which is actually an antidepressant, actually does do that. It does knock out your serotonin.
Okay.
That's one of the, unfortunately, that's one of the side effects. So I had both of them going at the same time. Anyway. So that was one crossroads, my mom's funeral. And then that's when I started to think about there's got to be another way for me to deal with, this anxiety that I'm struggling with and have for so many years. But I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know how to do it.
Neither of us did.
Right? No, and I don't know. My doctor never questioned refilling that prescription every 3 months. He just did it. And so I just kept taking it. And when we moved, so the second crossroads, and this is where the rubber hit the road. We moved from Maryland to where we currently are, and in the state we're in, they won't fill a Xanax prescription unless you've tried a bunch of other things first. It is considered a much more serious thing to put someone on Xanax permanently.
Right.
And so I remember when my prescription was running out, and of course I'm getting anxious and upset and all of that. And I went to a doctor and she said, sorry, can't do it. Well, I didn't do well with that, but I was backed into a corner.
Well, she said, let's try this other stuff first.
Yeah.
To help you. I think the doctor wanted you to get off of Xanax.
Yeah.
And prescribe the other stuff to help with that process.
Yeah.
But then at that point, you really didn't need the Xanax.
No, and I think I was
more anyway.
Yeah, and I think I was much more aware of exactly what it was doing to me.
Yeah.
There was not only the deadened emotions, but you and I didn't have real great communication at that point. And I'm just going to be blunt here. It affected our sex life. For me, it was not a great thing. I mean, we're talking about years of, all of this crap in my system, and, this is what it will do if you stay on it for years.
Yeah.
This is the problem. One of the problems. So I had to make a decision, and I decided that the best thing for me to do was to wean myself off it. I did not have a doctor's help with that at all. I made the decision myself. And I started to walk through that process, and that was a couple of months, I guess, or a month of the withdrawal.
Right.
It was
something like that.
Yeah.
But you were also going to the gym
every day,
or every weekday.
Yeah.
That we had found. We
right.
talked about that before. And so I think that helped.
Yeah. And we were starting to, I wasn't drinking as much as I was prior to that. I think the drinking before was more of a problem.
Okay.
The drinking in years prior to that, like when Bernie was dying and I was going through all that I was drinking too much, and I knew it. So we were also starting to go through the process of getting that under control. I never wanted to call myself an alcoholic. I was flirting with it, I think, there for a few years. I could have tipped over into that pretty quickly.
You could have.
Yeah.
But we both, well, mainly you, but we both have a healthy relationship with it. That's the way you want to say it.
That's how I see it now.
Right. It's not like if you have a drink that you're going to fall back into it.
No, and I know when I was going through all that, I felt like I needed it.
Okay.
I did. Yeah, I felt like I needed it to get through the day.
Okay.
And that's not the way I feel now. We basically we drink some wine on Friday night, and then we might have something on Saturday night. Sometimes we get a little tipsy, but that's really it. We're not serious hardcore. We're not hardcore drinkers anymore. Or I'm not anymore.
I was going to say what?
Yeah. No.
So we have a healthy relationship, and there's no dependence.
Mm-mm.
And we can skip weekends, and
we don't, but we could.
I mean, we could. I have.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But anyway, so all right. So continue on. So all of this was happening before your stepdad died.
That's when I started to take the Xanax on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when he died, you started dealing with this, with your past.
Yep.
Okay. And that's when, our marriage was affected.
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
I know I went through a good solid 6 months, I want to say, where I was just questioning whether I wanted to be married at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to foist blame on you, but you were walking through some stuff too. Like after your dad died, some things came to the surface that made it hard for me to walk through that process with you. You were never great with dealing with your own emotions.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I don't know why, but it was hard for you. And when your dad died, all of that came to the surface, and you pushed me out of your life. You didn't want me to grieve with you or to help you grieve at all.
Right.
And you know, that did some damage, because when I was going through all my stuff, it made me question whether I could rely on you or not. I didn't know if I could, you know. So now I'm really alone. All of our quote unquote friends from that church had abandoned me. So I don't have any friends. Literally didn't have any friends for like 5 years, I think. A good 5 years after we left the church.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Yeah. I was just done with people. I was just done with people. But so I felt very alone, you know. But you stepped up and you started fighting back to restore our marriage to what it should be. And I was not fighting. I was kind of done fighting. I don't know if I felt like I had been holding up more than my part of the bargain for too long, or I don't know what I was feeling, but I just didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore. And that's when I started to question whether I wanted to be married at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, you know, as much as I hate the phrase, it takes a village, I will say that one of the things that kept me from pulling that trigger was, well, my kids. I'd been through that myself as a kid. I did not want to put my children through that.
Right.
The divorce, all the ugliness. And B, I don't think I could have faced my parents. I don't think I could have looked them in the eye and said, I don't love him anymore and I don't want to be married. That would have brought the wrath of Nana down on my neck pretty hard. I don't think my stepmom would have put up with that for 2 seconds. You know, there's no way I could have told them that I was ever thinking that. And I don't know if we've told them since. I have no idea. There's a few of my friends who know about this ugly part of our relationship, you know, that I was thinking about leaving you. My brothers, I think a couple of my brothers know, but it's not something that we talk about very often. But I do know that being on all that medication and the alcohol was a contributing factor. It was a factor, you know? So I know, here's the thing. I know a lot of people are taking these drugs. They are widely available. They're prescribed pretty freely by a lot of doctors. But I think it's a good idea to step back from time to time and just kind of evaluate things. Is this really what I need to get through my day-to-day life? Is there something else I can change that will help me to get past, you know, anxiety, depression, you know, whatever it is, that does not require me to take a pill?
Yeah.
You know, for me, it turned out to be changing my diet, because I was still eating a lot of like processed food and sugar and all that kind of stuff, and cutting back the alcohol for sure. And then exercise. And I was, at that point, I was walking a couple miles a day. So I was getting outside.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it was more than a couple miles a day. But all of those things opened my eyes and helped me to realize that maybe I didn't need the pills. What I really needed to be doing was taking care of my health
Yes.
And then a lot of the anxiety just vanished. Some of that was also moving away from the toxic environment that we were in and moving into a more healthy, a healthier place, and, just kind of getting a fresh start.
Sure.
For me anyway, I needed to get away from people who recognized me. That's what I felt like. I needed to get away from people who knew me before, when I was going through all that stuff, and still saw me through that lens. I needed to get somewhere where people would start to get to know me the way I am now, and not the way I was then. But I have to. I recommend watching that series. It was a real eye opener for me. Just about Dopesick. It's on Amazon, or Hulu.
One of those two.
It's on one of those two. Anyway, it was an eye opener for me because you don't realize how prevalent it is that people take this stuff on a regular basis, and you start taking it, and it changes your mood and your sleep and your eating. It changes everything, and it happens kind of gradually, and you don't even realize it's happening. And then you turn around and, well, I can't live without it now.
Sure.
And that's exactly what happened to me.
I wonder if it was, given our lack of knowledge about health,
mm-hmm.
that if it was, it was definitely a stopgap in the beginning.
Yeah.
But we didn't get there wasn't a lot of knowledge.
No.
Out there about what we should be doing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and the thought just came and went.
All right, so we moved down here.
Yeah.
And you can't get it anymore.
No.
You got to you got to be on this other stuff. So you weaned off, and you're going to the gym,
mm-hmm.
this particular gym, which is a hour of CrossFit every morning.
Yep.
And that was also friendships you made.
That was probably one of the biggest factors.
The friendship?
Yes, I started surrounding myself with people who actually believed in me.
Yeah.
And who liked me for me, and who supported me. Like when I was very open with some of my closer friends there that I had been taking it, and then I was trying to get off, and they would message me, check on me. They were making sure that I was okay when I was going through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Because at least the first couple of weeks, because what I had to do was take smaller and smaller doses, and that's why it took a month plus, was because I had to week by week take, that's how you do it. You don't just stop. If I just stopped, I'd be a total disaster. But I reached a point where the fatigue from going through the withdrawal was pretty overwhelming. I would drag myself out of bed. I would get to the gym. I would somehow get through the workout, and I'd come home and I'd climb back into bed, and I'd be there the rest of the day. I could not function it was a couple of weeks. It was just really, really hard.
Yeah.
And my sleep was a mess, and it was just, but the people, my friends from the gym, were right there with me, and they were checking on me, and they were making sure I was okay. And I don't know that that's the kind of support I could have gotten from the people that we moved away from. As a matter of fact, I'll say that most of the people that we knew in Maryland did not know that I was taking it.
Right. But if they had found out, this is just a feeling.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that they wouldn't have been that supportive.
It would have been a lot of condemnation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just, if there's one thing I if I could just convey one thing here, it's, step back, look at your life, and, try to evaluate whether you really need this pills to get through your daily life, right? I also weaned myself off the sleeping pills.
Yes.
Which is another thing. I had been taking that longer than the Xanax. Because the insomnia started somewhere in my late 30s, which is what happened with my dad and my grandmother and one of my aunts. And it's like, it was like this rampant thing in my family, right? And so what do? I just asked my dad what he was taking, and he told me, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, that works for sleep. So I started with the small dose, and then that stopped working, and I took a bigger dose, and then that stopped working and took a bigger dose, and I finally ended up with this big dose of this antidepressant that I'm taking every night to go to sleep, just to sleep.
Yep.
And so I took that longer than the Xanax. Got off the Xanax first because this particular antidepressant is pretty ubiquitous, like a lot of people take it for sleep, so that wasn't hard to get from the doctor.
Yeah,
right?
They weren't giving you problems.
No, they weren't going to give me problems about that. But I decided that I didn't want any of it anymore. And so I had to wean myself off of that too.
Yeah.
And I take sleep supplements now. It's like natural stuff.
Yeah, just more natural stuff.
Yeah, I take natural supplements now to go to sleep. I wish I could just climb in bed and go to sleep and not have to take anything, but I'm getting old, and I'm not gonna. I've got a formula.
It's genetic.
It is just somewhat genetic. I have a formula now for and for someone in my family to lay down in bed and go to sleep and most nights get 7 hours of sleep, that's a freaking miracle right there. That my dad doesn't even do that. One of my brothers doesn't do that. One of my sons is actually struggling with it now, and he doesn't do that. So, I think that's just, I'm eating better. I'm moving around. I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to do. I'm exercising, and because all of that is in balance, and I don't have the anxiety issues all the time anymore, I'm able to climb into bed and sleep almost like a normal person. Mm-hmm. Not quite, but almost. So it just watching that series and watching all these people struggle with the addiction and all of that, it brought it all back. It brought back all the experiences I had with my mom, who was she was a worse addict than I was. I mean,
oh yeah,
for sure. She was, to my knowledge, she was taking both Oxy and Vicodin, and I don't even know what else. And she was drinking a lot. She was an alcoholic, so she had all of that going on. And the phone would ring, and there's the ID, and it's my mom, and I always had to pray and then evaluate very quickly when the phone rang. Do I want to answer it right now? Mm-hmm. Do I have a window of time where I can either let her just talk because that's what she wanted to do, and there were other times when she would call me and deliberately pick a fight. It's like, okay, well, do I have a block of time right now to deal with that, right? It was hard. She was a difficult person to be around. And honestly, a lot of it was just the damage she did to herself taking all that stuff all the time. Yeah. Her mental capacity was just trashed. It was trashed. And I wouldn't want anyone to listen to this and walk away thinking that I'm condemning anyone who takes, any of these anxiety meds or whatever for having to, for dealing with your life. I don't want anybody to feel condemned or anything like that. I just think from time to time, it might be a good idea to step back, look at it and say, okay, do I really need this? You know, why am I continuing to take it? Is there something else in my life that I can adjust so that this gets straightened out and I don't have to take this anymore?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a good thing to do. And believe me, that withdrawal process is hellish. It's awful. You know, we've talked an awful lot in this podcast about Dr. Peterson, and he, for the past 2 years, he went through some real upheaval 2 years ago. His wife, who he loves and adores, and he's been married to, I think they've been married as long as we have, maybe a little longer.
Probably. Yep.
But his wife was suddenly diagnosed with a terminal cancer, you know. And so he's trying to walk through this process with this woman that he loves, and the doctor prescribed him it was either Xanax or some equivalent of Xanax.
I think, yeah.
And it was somewhere around the same dose I was taking. So his wife actually survived. I mean, she's fine now, and, you know, family's getting back on track and all of that. But once he got through it, that's what he did. He stepped back and said, okay, we're through this now. I don't need to take this pill anymore. So he tried to get off of it, and it took a year. The withdrawal process for him was just awful. He ended up in the hospital several times. He almost died a couple of times.
The withdrawal was much more difficult for him.
Yes, it was.
Either way. And
yeah.
He had to do some extra special things.
He did.
To get through it.
Yeah.
And get off this particular drug.
So, you know, mine obviously wasn't that awful. And boy, when he told that story, I just kind of stepped back and like, wow, I am so grateful that mine wasn't like that.
Yeah,
jeez, gosh, I can't imagine. So, like I said, all that to say, you know, step outside of yourself. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're taking. How can you change it? I don't think that human beings should have to take 2 or 3 different mood-altering drugs just to survive day to day. There are a few exceptions to that. There are people with legitimate brain disorders and depression and all of this other stuff. But I think there's an awful lot of people who just take it just because they think they need it to survive day to day. And I'm just not really sure that that's the case.
No, I think a lot of people, for many other reasons as well, need to look at their diet.
Mm-hmm. That's a big factor. Yeah, that's a big factor.
I think those two things, exercise and diet. And I'm not saying go on a diet. I'm talking about, and we may have talked about this in the past, but just, you know, eating real food and getting away from processed stuff, cutting back on sugar. Sugar's huge. Things that have sugar in them, and then the exercise. Those two things seem to solve a lot of issues for people.
They do.
Okay, so that's enough of. I mean, that's kind of like the soapbox about. Here's how you should be eating,
right?
And all that. I don't want to cut short what you were saying. So
okay.
Go ahead. Is there anything else that you wanted to?
I don't think so. I just I hope that when people interact with us, that they don't just look at us and see this perfect couple who's got it all together, and you know we.
Well, that was my thing. How does our marriage play into this? And
mm-hmm.
Besides the fact that we were struggling and you were feeling like you didn't want to deal with it anymore, how did marriage play a part in making things better? Did it?
Yes, it did. I made the choice when I was struggling with everything that I went through as a child. I made a conscious choice not to seek out a therapist or go to a psychiatrist or whatever. I didn't.
It was discouraged.
It was discouraged in our church, but honestly, I don't know that I would have done well in that environment anyway. I have a really, like, just sitting here sharing all of this and knowing that it's going out there in the ether and people are going to be listening to it. That's a hard thing for me to deal with, right? Because I struggle really hard with vulnerability and, opening up parts of myself, my flaws and whatever. And I don't know that sitting in a stranger's office on his couch and pouring out all that stuff, I just don't know if I could have done it.
Okay.
I don't know that it would have helped, but as we started to kind of rebuild our relationship, you're the one that helped me get through all of that. You listen to me talk about it endlessly, all of the crap that I went through as a kid, right? And there were a lot of things that I told you, and I remember over and over again you going, wow, you've never told me that before. Yeah. And it's because I chose not to remember a lot of the really ugly stuff that went on. And a lot of what I shared with you was the voices in my head that had been talking to me for years and what they were saying to me. But then once I verbalized it and, got it out, it stopped. I didn't hear it anymore.
You're not talking about
hearing voices?
Hearing voices. You're talking about
your inner dialogue, so to speak.
Inner dialogue that has been affected or molded negatively by how you were treated.
Yeah.
What your stepdad said about you.
Yeah.
I think mostly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it was my mom too, but yeah, him mostly. Yeah.
And she backed it. Well, but she would
back him up. Yeah. Yep.
So. Okay.
But it took 2 years, and we would go out and you would just listen to me talk, and talking all of that out it was like facing the dragon. It was like I'm finally talking about all this stuff that's been rattling around in my head since I was 18.
Yeah. And
I'm getting it out. And I remember, somewhere around the end of that 2-year period, you finally looked at me and said, does it help you to keep, because you're telling me a lot of the same stuff over and over again. Does that help you to talk about it over and over again? And that's when it dawned on me. It's like, I think I'm at the end of this. I think I've shared everything I can share. What?
When you started to repeat yourself?
Yeah, I think I was. And that's when you looked at me and you were like, more or less what you were saying was, I think you're done. You're repeating yourself now. So I think, if it helps you to keep talking about it, we can do that. But otherwise, it might be time to just move on with your own life, kind of thing.
Sure.
And it wasn't just my friends who were there for me when I was going through all that withdrawal. You were too. I'm still homeschooling 3 of the kids back then. Yeah. So, I had to get through my day-to-day life and go through this awful withdrawal at the same time.
Yeah.
And you were here for me. And actually my kids knew they knew what was going on. They knew what I was doing. So, they were as supportive as kids can be.
Sure.
They tried to help out when they could, and they,
The younger 3.
Yeah, the younger 3. Yeah.
Okay. And let's see, the older ones were already married. Not in the house.
Yeah,
anyway,
not in the house. So, how did it affect our marriage? That's how, just you should also be building that kind of relationship with your spouse where you feel like, I can tell this person anything and not fear retaliation, repercussions, anger, bitterness, whatever it is.
Right.
You should always feel like my spouse is going to be there for me no matter what I'm going through.
Yes.
And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean,
No, it's not. But I think if you decide this is the way it should be, right?
yeah,
It's like if you set up the atmosphere of, you can tell me anything, and
yeah,
and then I'll not not condemn you, because you're one, right?
yeah,
You're a unit,
yeah.
and you're like, okay, you're telling me this horrible thing or this confession or whatever it is, and it's not. It doesn't make things better to say, to bring condemnation or whatever, but it's more like, okay, so we're a team. How are we gonna get through it together? How are we gonna solve the problem together? Which makes, I think you could almost just decide to do it.
It actually is a decision. It can't be feelings based at all.
Right.
It has to be
if you let you just
a decision.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if you just let your feelings run the show, then it's like I feel betrayal, I feel this, I feel that,
right?
And you're all over the place, and you're not supportive, and you kind of begin to tear the bond,
right?
And people head down that road, and it's like, you don't have to do that. Just it's like, this is my partner, my part of me,
yeah,
right? Let's solve the problem together.
I mean, when I was sharing all that stuff from my childhood, it would have been just as easy for you to go in the other direction and be like, how come you never told me any of this? How come you never told me all this was going through your head? And, how could you do this to the children, when put them through all this when you knew you had a problem, and, but you didn't do that. You didn't do that. You stood behind me and you helped me and you listened to me, and I got through it. Probably better than I would have with a therapist.
I don't know, probably. But I can't, I'll say it publicly, I didn't know what I was doing.
I know.
Right? Other than marriage is important and we need to make this work.
Yeah.
And that was all that was in my head, and you would talk about, I think I'm going to go, I'm going to leave and get away. And it's like, I'm going, well, I don't know how to stop that, but, I that's not what I want to happen.
Right.
We need to make this work, and that's what we're going to do. And so it's not like I didn't have any trying to, any special training or stuff like that. It's just more of a, grace of God helping me, and then a decision to make it work and do whatever I could.
Right.
Which I never felt was a lot. Back then it was like, almost felt like not doing anything. But I suppose listening. But
well, no, but on my end, something that I struggled with since I was a kid was being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I never. It was not something that was encouraged in my house.
Yeah, I can see that.
Open up, share my feelings, and all that. My parents didn't care about that. They weren't interested in that. And when I did, if I got upset, cried, if I was sad, if I was depressed, I was sent to my room.
Yeah.
And to deal with it myself. I was not permitted to show that kind of emotion, out in public. And if I got too excited or too happy, I was told to calm down. Just calm down, So expressing my emotions in a healthy way, it's not something I learned as a kid, right? And it made me feel like being vulnerable is putting myself out there. And what if I can't trust you with what I'm telling you? Because I couldn't trust my parents with anything.
Yeah.
I kept a lot from them. So just knowing that, you would be there for me, and you weren't going to betray me or talk about me behind my back, or, all the other things, all the other ugly things that go with that. I could trust you. That was big for me. I don't know if I can trust this therapist. I'm sitting in his office and I don't know. I don't know that person. I did know you.
True. Yeah.
So, anyway, that was just, that was probably the most difficult thing that we ever walked through as a couple. We've been through a couple of other pretty difficult things in the past 5 years or so, but since we have more of a united front, we're kind of walking through it together.
Yeah.
And sorting it out together, rather than I'm doing my thing and you're doing your thing, and then, we might have a clash of some kind because I think you're doing it wrong and you think I'm doing it wrong, or whatever it is,
Oh, yeah.
A lot of couples struggle with that, Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. But we come to agreements, or we both agree that both the way we're each doing it is okay. And
yeah.
We learn.
Right.
Okay. So.
Wow, we've talked for almost an hour again. I wasn't sure how long this was going to go, huh?
Well, let's wrap it up.
I wasn't sure how long this was going to go because this was very spontaneous. I finished that series and I just burst into tears. It brought back so many horrible, ugly memories for me, but also it made me think about my own experience with walking through a lot of that withdrawal nonsense and the being on different drugs and all that stuff. It brought it all back. And your first response was, "Oh, we need to do a podcast now." You got to talk about this.
Well, sure.
So, and that was a couple of weeks ago, and I've had some time to kind of think it through and process it a little. And so, listening audience, I want you to know that for me to sit here and open up about this and talk about it is not easy. I don't like talking about all that ugly stuff. I don't like revealing my weaknesses to people.
Nobody.
No, but I have a particular problem with that. But I do it because I sincerely want to help other people who might be struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
And I want everyone who could possibly be taking, any of these myriad of drugs to, you need to step back from time to time and evaluate exactly what's going on in your life and what you could possibly change.
Sure.
You really do.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be taking one of these drugs either.
No.
It could just be you're struggling with things and there may be something you need to change.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But, and the other thing is just whatever happens, you face it together as a single unit or entity or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Because when one person is hurting, you're both hurt.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
And besides all that, just being able to say how proud I am.
Oh, come on.
Well, I mean, you did all that stuff.
I had a lot of help. I did not do it alone. I did not walk through any of that alone. I couldn't have. I knew that continuing down that path that I was on, I was going to end up exactly like my mom. There was just that was another crossroads for me.
Yeah.
It was something that the older girls told me. And I just remember getting furious at them for even suggesting that I could end up like my mom. God, what a horrible thing for a daughter to say about her mother. But I have my reasons.
Well, I know.
you know. But, and I'm glad that you're proud of me, but it is not something I did myself. I did not do that by myself at all. I had a huge network of people that got me through all of that. You, first of all. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and name names because I didn't ask anybody's permission to be named here. But, you know, I had a couple of great coaches at that CrossFit gym. I had some women that I never thought that I was going to have friendships with women again. I had given up on that. I literally had given up on that. I was done. I was not going to have friendships with women at all. And a couple of those women, I'm still friends with them. They're relentless. They were not going to just let me
right.
sit back and, you know, nurse my misogyny, because that's what it had turned into. You know, I was just like, women are awful and I didn't want anything to do with them. And that was, you know, wrong thinking on my part. It's the type of women you hang out with. Not all women, but the thing about walking through hard times is don't do it alone.
Yeah.
You may not need the pills. Maybe you do briefly for a season, whatever it is. Don't try to do it alone. And you and your spouse do need to be a team. You need to work on it together, because that is how you build your relationship and make it last. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, yeah. You feel like I've got to build my relationship first and then I can do that. It's like, no, that's part of building.
Yeah.
Part of strengthening
your
your relationship.
Okay, here's a good analogy, because this just popped in my head. And we'll wrap it up now, because it's been an hour.
Yep.
But if you think about, and you cut down a tree, the tree has rings, right?
They do.
And some rings are thicker and some rings are thinner.
Yeah.
And each ring represents a year of that tree's life, correct?
Yes.
So obviously the thicker lines are the years when there was a lot of rain, or the weather was right, or it was able to grow as a tree is supposed to grow, or maybe even grow better than a tree is supposed to grow, right?
Okay.
And then the thinner lines are the years when there was drought, or maybe a wildfire, or whatever it is, right? And that's what a marital relationship is. But without each one of those rings, the tree doesn't grow. It takes both. It takes the thinner rings and the thicker rings. And they all come together and they make the tree.
Yeah.
So, you know, you think about it that way. You're going to have lean years when, you know, when things are not great. Maybe you're fighting a lot. Maybe you're working through issues, whatever it is. And then you're going to have the better years, you know, when things are going well, and you have to invest in both. You can't, you know, if you start to realize that tree ring is getting a little thin, then you need to get in there and do some work.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
Okay. All right. I hope this wasn't too rambling and confusing. And I hope I didn't overly indict the entire drug industry, although...
You should.
I should. I don't know. After the past 2 years, I'm ready to... Well, never mind. I probably shouldn't say that out loud.
Move on with that.
So, I hope that this was helpful. I hope that, you know, maybe you can take one part away from it and just reevaluate things or think about things in your relationship with your spouse. That's really all we want anyway. We just want to help people, you know?
Sure.
If you have questions or comments, you can email marriageonthehalfshell.com and we will respond to those.
Marriage on the Half Shell.
Sorry.
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Thank you. And we will respond to those. We'll respond to questions,
Well,
and
we'll look at them.
yeah, we will look at
Maybe
them
talk
at your
about 'em.
questions and comments. And so we will talk to you next